Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 255 or 255. My name is Jono Logan, and you know what? We're not going to waste any time getting into things today because we have a really big special episode going on. Joining me today as my co-host is Retro Encounters host, Michael Sollosi.
That's me.
Hey, Sollosi. And joining us today are two very special guests, the folks behind the legendary indie RPG studio Zeboyd Games, Robert Boyd and Bill Stiernberg. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, doing real good.
Thanks for having us here.
Oh, geez, it's our pleasure, and thank you very much for being here because it's I suspect it's been a stressful, busy week for both of you.
Yeah, it's been really crazy. We've got our game coming out on Thursday, and just running around trying to spread the word, tell people about it, as well as fix any last-minute typos and other problems we run into.
Well, that's the beauty of being a small indie gaming studio. It's all up to you two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not to put more pressure on you. Well, Zeboyd, the game they're releasing is This Way Madness Lies. It will have been out for a few days when you're listening to this, but as of right now, you are rapidly approaching the launch date of November 10th on Steam. Just to break down what you're responsible for, aside from all of the publicity and stuff, Robert, you handle the writing, coding, and the overall design of your games, and Bill, you handle the graphics and the assets for the games, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
We somehow get them done, just the two of us, and we usually work with somebody to do audio.
And frankly, considering it's just the two of you, your output over the last decade has been absolutely astounding. Zeboyd Games, I guess you broke onto the scene with a smaller indie RPG called Breath of Death VII: The Beginning, and then you continued that with Cthulhu Saves the World, and those two games were eventually packaged together on Steam and became one of the most popular Steam bundles ever, I would imagine, for indie games. And then you started to branch into, I guess, licensed material. You did the third and fourth episodes of Penny Arcade Adventures on the Rain-Slick Precipice of Darkness. A few years ago, you released just a massive, classically inspired RPG that kind of looked like a cross between Chrono Trigger and Phantasy Star called Cosmic Star Heroine. FYI, we did 2 Retro Encounter episodes on that game last year.
Yep, right around a year ago in fall of 2021.
Yeah, and aside from This Way Madness Lies, your most recent game was Cthulhu Saves Christmas, which Mike and I actually got a chance to talk to you about that on episode 220 of Retro Encounter in January of 2020 in happier, less stressful days. We were all so young.
Just barely. I mean, 2 years and 8 months ago, or no, I can't math. 2 years and 11 months ago really, really feels like a different time in every way you can possibly say. So it's great talking to you again, Bill and Robert. But again, it's been less than 3 years, but it also feels like 20 years.
And that's probably even more so considering that during that time, you have both been in development of This Way Madness Lies. Now, we'll talk a lot about the game, of course, but broken down when I first saw it, I saw it's a magical girl RPG based on Shakespearean plays. Holy crap, this sounds amazing. What a brilliant idea of just mashing up two things that otherwise you wouldn't suspect go together. So This Way Madness Lies, the name of the game comes from King Lear, where Lear is trying to comprehend the behavior of his daughters, and he kind of just puts it out of hand. He dismisses it, saying, no, I can't think about that because that way madness lies. But how did you guys get the idea for this game? Mashing these two things together. Where did the idea come from?
Well, we were thinking it'd be lots of fun to do a magical girl RPG because there really aren't that many of them. They're way back on the Super Nintendo. There was a Sailor Moon RPG that never got, officially released in English, and then you get the occasional one like Blue Reflection, and then and there's some other games that I feel were inspired by the whole genre, like Persona. I feel is basically just a magical girl anime. Just you have boys on your team too. But we were looking at that and thinking, oh, what should our next game be? What's something that hasn't really been done a whole lot? And we're like, oh, magical girl game. And then, most magical girl series have some sort of theme along with their powers and such. Like Sailor Moon, of course, has the whole planetary theme. And so I was just brainstorming ideas for a theme we could do for this game. And my wife is a huge Shakespeare fan, and she's like, "Oh, do Shakespeare. There's all sorts of strong women in his plays, and lots of crazy events." And we looked into it, thought it was a great idea, and This Way Madness Lies was created.
Yeah, and there's something funny about how we came up with the idea too. I don't know how much of this you remember, Robert, but when we first started coming up with the ideas for Cosmic Star Heroine, like way back, the original idea was that Alyssa, the Cosmic Star Heroine, was going to be like a famous pop star, and then have like a double life as a secret agent. And as her secret agent, she would be able to turn into a magical girl and use magic powers, like during the dungeons and battles and stuff. And we ended up dropping that, but we dropped it super early in the design process. And I feel like this is kind of getting back, like bringing that idea that we were kind of excited about, but couldn't get it to work, back into the fold, especially after making, that game and Cthulhu Saves the World, which is a little bit more, like darker, spookier stuff, even though it's comedy, and doing something that's more lighthearted and colorful. And that's kind of another reason why we wanted to do this.
Yeah. What's your respective background with Shakespeare? Like you mentioned that your wife really liked Shakespeare. Before you started work on this game, what was your familiarity with the works of William Shakespeare? Bill.
Oh, me? Oh,
sorry, Bill Shakespeare.
Oh,
as we like to call him. Familiar. We're on first name basis. Billy Boy.
It's easy to confuse. I mean, they're both BS, so it works out.
Yeah, there you go. Me personally, I've only been a casual fan, and I think like a lot of people, at least in this country, know Shakespeare from what they learned in high school
or Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, so that's me too, and I found a lot of the stories fascinating, but we didn't cover all of them. I mean, most people don't know about all of them, and it's definitely easy enough to know just from kind of that general broad overview knowledge that there's a lot of different topics and a lot of interesting characters and settings and plot twists and everything from like ghosts and betrayals and murders and stuff that happen in the stories. That there's plenty of material to work with.
Oh yeah, I mean, Shakespeare is a fountain of good ideas and inspiration. And what is your respective background with Magic Girls?
You can answer that one, Robert.
Sure. Okay. So Magic Girls growing up, there was a fair bit of Sailor Moon in the house. I had a sister who was a huge fan, and I liked anime, and it was on, so I watched it too. And like I said, I played the Super Nintendo Sailor Moon game, and I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. And I wouldn't say like I know a whole lot about it, but I know a moderate amount. I think after Sailor Moon, my next major thing was Magic Knight Rayearth, which I know mostly from the Working Designs game that they localized.
Now we're into my area of expertise. Jono has Shakespeare, and I have I have
Magic Girls.
Let's say Japanese superhero shows where they transform. Sega Saturn game for Magic Knight Rayearth was one of an early game that was directed by Reiko Kodama, who recently passed away.
Yeah.
She was the director of Phantasy Star 4 and the producer for Skies of Arcadia. So that and the Sailor Moon SNES RPG are my earliest familiarity with magical girls in RPGs. But I mean, magical girls themselves have been around since the I think late 60s, early 70s. There was some magic witch girl anime, and then you have tokusatsu shows, which are live action shows like Kamen Rider or Power Rangers, with several of those that were including a few adaptations of Sailor Moon from the 90s onwards. But really the definitive magical girl series is Sailor Moon by Naoko Takeuchi. It was eventually picked up by Toei, which is the same studio that makes things like Power Rangers. So they're used to transforming anime and TV shows.
They had a good late 90s.
Yeah, they did. Well, this is early 90s.
You're right, it was.
Sailor Moon, I think, was originally published in the early 80s. I'm sorry, in the late 80s, but then it sort of became a definitive show of the 90s. And my secret dream is because Naoko Takeuchi is married to Yoshihiro Togashi, who wrote Yu Yu Hakusho, that someday their children will make the ultimate juvenile delinquent magical girl anime. But I don't know, that still remains yet a dream. But I mostly am a fan of Japanese superhero shows where they transform, and Sailor Moon does sort of share a center of a Venn diagram with those.
So, funny story. When my family was visiting Japan, we went to Universal Studios while they had a Sailor Moon event, live show thing going on there.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were sitting there with the family, and, it was getting kind of scary. And, one of my kids who was littler at the time was, getting nervous. And I said, the worst thing possible. Tuxedo Mask came on the scene. I said, "Oh, don't worry, he'll save them."
Oh no,
no, that's not what happens.
And my wife was like, "What did you just say?" You're surrounded by hardcore Sailor Moon fans. If any of them know English, they're mugging you after we leave here. It's like, Tuxedo Mask doesn't save them. He distracts the enemy briefly, gets captured, and then Sailor Moon saves the day.
Yes, Tuxedo Mask will complicate things.
Throw a rose and then become difficult.
Often become a hostage himself. But really, it's one or several of the Sailor Senshi that saves him. Or they're always called Sailor Scouts in English, but the word they use in Japanese is Senshi, which means soldier. It's
So that's my biggest magical girl faux pas.
but live tokusatsu shows for the popular brands are a thing in Japan. There's I've even seen music videos that are like parodies of those live action shows.
I would have loved to have seen that when I went to Universal Studios as a kid. All I got was Beetlejuice meets the Ghostbusters, and they danced.
No, it was really fun. They had the Sailor Moon live show, which had some 3D glasses stuff going on. They had a Monster Hunter exhibit that I didn't go to.
Oh, this is the best Sollosi episode ever.
And also, their other pop culture thing they had was a Final Fantasy roller coaster, but it was one of those VR roller coasters, and it was very silly. I mean, you strapped on the glasses and you just kind of flew around, and at some point Sephiroth and Cloud were fighting in front of you. And
that sounds like an amazing ride. Going to a place that I feel more comfortable, my love of Shakespeare, I guess, years and years of theater school kind of drilled it into my head. Like I still have multiple monologues on the tip of my tongue. But I guess my love of Shakespeare really got started with another adaptation. This Way Madness Lies is an adaptation of Shakespeare. I got my start with Shakespeare in an adaptation, and that's Gargoyles. In the late 90s, the Disney television show Gargoyles adapted multiple Shakespearean characters and situations for their storylines, including literally a 5-part episode that just was retelling Macbeth, but with gargoyles. And that I didn't know anything really about Shakespeare at first. And then there was that, and that kind of made me go, oh, wow, this is amazing. And I got a complete works of Bill Shakespeare and started reading what I could, because I was in grade 7. And some of it went way over my head, but that's what kind of came to mind when I was playing this game. It's Shakespeare's scenarios and characters are so vivid and human even today that they can easily be adapted into other stories while keeping a lot of the magic of Shakespeare. And the fact that you took that and you combined it with what we were just talking about, Magic Girls, is, again, kind of a genius idea, guys. It's a really, really smart concept for a game.
I really thought you were going to talk about a different cartoon when you're talking about 90s adaptations of Shakespeare, because the hugely popular animated film The Lion King is an adaptation of Hamlet, and its sequel, its direct-to-video sequel, was an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet
with a slightly happier ending.
Yes. and when Lion King was accused of being a ripoff of the the Osamu Tezuka manga, Kimba the White Lion. Yes, Kimba, Simba, it's a white lion, and the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are different animals besides a meerkat and a warthog. But when I first heard about Lion King, Hamlet, Kimba connection, that was my introduction to Osamu Tezuka and reading disgusting amounts of manga online. So yeah, Shakespeare has its finds its way into a lot of different places, but where we are today is in this really remarkable indie RPG. That from the first time you announced this premise, I could like feel my eye sockets widening. It's like, oh no, I don't know what this is going to be, but I know I have to play it.
Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about This Way Madness Lies? Like, what's the plot of the game?
So the gist is that there's a school, and they have basically a drama club, and the story centers around 7 of the main or the cast of this drama club, and they have their typical school responsibilities. So they have clubs. One of the characters, Viola, has her sports that she does.
All of the sports.
Yeah, all of them, literally. And then they have school where they have to do homework, and they have classes and stuff. But then there are also magical girls with wands that allow them to both transform and have magical powers, as well as enter alternate dimensions. So in this game, the whole cast, they're all huge Shakespeare fans, especially one in particular, Paulina. She's constantly obsessing over it. And they sort of detect this shadowy like presence that's like seeping into their world, and they get these messages from these other dimensions asking for help, like SOS calls. And so they're able to use their powers to open these portals to these other worlds, and they find out that they're basically dimensions that come from Shakespeare's plays. And so they actually explore these worlds and find out why they're being corrupted by these shadow monsters and try to set the plays right. Like, I guess it's not too much of a spoiler, but in the very first segment of the game, you enter this world of Romeo and Juliet, which everyone's familiar with, and it's kind of a good starting point.
It was a good starting point, yeah.
In the play, Romeo is kind of eavesdropping on Juliet at the balcony, and she's talking about how she wishes that their families could get along. And as soon as Romeo comes out to, tell her about his love for her, a giant mutant rose plant abducts him and sprouts up giant poisonous vines all over Verona, the city where they are. So you see that the characters come in during this, and they see this happen, and Juliet tells them to please save her, save Romeo, and they actually go and do that to set the play right, and before they go back to their world. And then the rest of the game kind of follows, like, why is this happening? Why is it Shakespeare? How do they set it right? And who are these characters that share the same names as them from these Shakespearean plays coming into their world and asking for help? So there's a lot of different settings that we can explore, all these different plays. Meanwhile, you also have sections where you're going to class and answering questions from the teacher about the plays and deciding on what plays you're going to do. You actually have control over that in the game. You have to, in one segment, Imogen, the main character, gets to choose a pet to take care of, and there's different cutscenes that result from that. So it kind of carries you between dungeons, fighting monsters as a magical girl, and then spending your time in the real world dealing with classes and sleepover parties with your friends and raising pets and that sort of slice of life stuff.
All right. I have 3 comments here. First of all, the slice of life interjections, which I think you call intermissions sometimes, those are great. It immediately brings the Persona games to mind, especially answering questions in class as part of gameplay. And I thought that was a really interesting choice, especially since you did a similar thing in Cthulhu Saves Christmas, where you got to choose how you spend your time in between the big dungeon segments of the game. So that's not really work-life balance. I guess you could call it like life battle balance. Was interesting again. The second thing, I really enjoyed the references and concepts that were introduced in both in simple things like character names and things that manifested themselves in gameplay bigger, like everyone knows the line from Romeo and Juliet, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So naturally the monsters in the Romeo and Juliet stage are thorns and rose monsters. So that was amusing. And you have a lot of character names and place names, Stratford upon Avon High School. There's one of the teachers is named Miss Marlowe because Christopher Marlowe is one of the historical figures that
contemporaries Shakespeare,
contemporaries of Shakespeare, and sometimes theorized to be the true author of Shakespeare's plays. But just like a lot of clever references that, even if someone doesn't know a lot about Shakespeare, would happily accept, but are rewarding to people that do enjoy seeing the references present. And the third point I was going to make is you use a lot of language directly from Shakespeare. When the main characters are viewing scenes from the plays, or when they meet a character from the play and they say a line that's very similar to what they say in the play, and sometimes you use lines not from Shakespeare but speaking in that manner. But you also have the translation option. Where if you press right on your D-pad or your controls, it'll give a quote modern translation unquote to the Shakespearean language being used.
Yeah, you basically have your own version of Sparks Notes in the game, but one that is spiked with your trademark sense of humor rather than just dry, not really interesting translations. In fact, I mean, I don't know if this would be counting as a spoiler, but again, like I'm a theater nerd. So the fact that this big rose plant who wants to eat Romeo, you guys started translating his stuff, and it went into a very popular song from a certain musical that involves a giant man-eating plant. And I thought that made me laugh pretty hard.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite musicals. And so I try to get, a little reference in just about all of our games to that. But like here with the giant rose monster, it was just, too easy to do.
Oh, that's sometimes the best ideas, though. The ones you're like, well, we have to do this. I mean, we can't not do this. It's right there. And I mean, there are a lot of other clever little things that work Shakespeare into the Magic Girls. For example, how each one of the Sailor Scouts, they're scouts. So you use ingenue as their title, which is amazing because ingenue is it's a term describing an innocent young woman, and that's the ingenue roles. There's ingenue roles in every Shakespearean play, whether it be a comedy, tragedy, like Ophelia would be an ingenue. So each one is an ingenue. I thought that was really quite clever. That was a smart joke that maybe some people wouldn't get, but the people who do are really going to enjoy it.
Oh yeah, having ingenue as like the noun for the heroes themselves, which depending on the show could be Senshi or Scout or Ranger or whatever. It was a very, very smart choice. I loved it.
Yeah. In terms of the game itself, the pixel art is, I mean, your studio is well known for your pixel art. It's absolutely stunning. Beautiful, beautiful pixel art, both in the sprite design and in the backgrounds. What were some of your inspirations for the graphic style of this game?
Okay, well, I guess the easiest place to start is the actual characters, because when we make a game, we usually kind of flesh out the characters first. And one of the something with the idea for this game, it's kind of inspired by magical girls, and a lot of that stuff people became aware of or was popularized in the 90s. And so I actually was inspired by mostly 90s fashion and styles and stuff. And a lot of the game is actually meant to sort of kind of reflect the way things kind of looked in the 90s. And it's not super blatant or anything in the game, but the way the outfits on the characters look is 90s style inspired. And a lot of the settings and the way they were drawn is sort of based on stuff that how it looked in the 90s, which is why the classroom has a chalkboard instead of a digital projector with, that detects your hand motions like they have now. But that's kind of how I came up with the general style. And then obviously I wanted to make the outfits have distinct colors. I mean, that's a given. Obviously, like every magical girl or even Power Rangers, each character has a specific color, and we came up with the characters' personalities kind of early, like that's as part of our typical design, and along with their personalities, we kind of come up with their general battle trait, like ability traits. So, as an example, a character might mostly focus on water elemental based attacks or earth element or fire. And so I would kind of take those abilities. Let's say it's if it's water, I might design their costume or their outfit to have a blue theme, or um, if it's a dark theme, like they use a lot of dark magic or whatever, it might be purple or kind of black in tone. And so once I come up with the color scheme, I can kind of match it to outfits that you would kind of look or kind of be styled after they were in the 90s. And that's kind of how it came. The actual, backgrounds and settings. There's a lot of a lot of diversity in the settings for this game, especially in the slice of life stuff. At first, our idea was to do cutscenes more like a comic book with comic panels. That would have, I think that would have worked, but I'm not sure we would have been able to really show all of the different locations in as much detail. It would have been focused a lot more on just characters, shots, and expressions, and we get that mostly from the portraits. But it was a lot of fun doing all this stuff. Most of the RPGs that we've done, the settings are either they're either like a fantasy setting or a science fiction-y setting. But these are classroom, grocery store,
bathroom.
There's multiple bathroom scenes. They're cool. That sounds weird to say, but I think people will like the events in there. And there's a zoo, there's a roller skating
just imagining
rink.
you sitting there on your computer being like drawing a bathroom, being like, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna.
Well, it's just like the scenes that happen in there are really funny and they're really amusing. So I think people get a kick out of it.
Including a very nice cameo, by the way.
Yeah.
Which I won't ruin here, but there's a nice cameo.
And also the zoo was really fun. Like there's a lot of cutscenes or, these slice of life segments where there's literally, you see a location or a background or, a setting just the one time. But it was a lot of fun making these. And just because they're modern settings and they're different and they're varied, it was definitely a lot of work, and I wasn't sure exactly how long it would take. But once I got into the groove of it, it started to come, especially after, sticking to that sort of 90s aesthetic or whatever that was the inspiration.
Once you committed to it, yeah.
And one side question, I didn't finish the game yet, but I have played through this far. This is only the first quarter or so. There's in one of the slice of life segments, the girls choose to go to either the I think it's either the zoo or the arcade, or the zoo or the roller rink. So if you choose roller rink instead of zoo, is there an entirely differently animated segment with a different boss fight?
Yeah, that's the cool thing about this game.
Yeah, all right.
You when you make the certain choices in the game is going to affect what happens, like the cutscenes and the little life segments that happen throughout the game. So you'll finish the game, and if you want to see the other route, there's different location. The characters, the dialogue, the setting of what happens, and maybe if there's a battle during that segment, it's going to be different.
Yeah, the game's mostly linear, but there's a few segments that it branches out like that.
Yeah, I noticed that there's, in one of the slice of life segments, you choose between going to the zoo or going to, I think it was a roller rink arcade place, and I picked zoo, and you fight there's a scene where the girls all go to the zoo together and then fight a boss battle, and I assumed that there was something would go differently if you chose the roller rink. And also there's segments like you can choose on how to adapt a Shakespeare play that you put on for the whole school. So I know that I only experienced one side of any of those paths, but around how many of those in the game are there? And was there one that you thought was particularly clever or fun to design or animate?
Robert, do you know how many roughly? Like I feel like there's several main ones and a bunch of lesser, main ones.
Yeah, a lot of them are early on. At one point it asks you to pick between one of 4 different pets, and you get several scenes depending on which pet you pick. There's the zoo versus roller rink thing. I think that's the only one that has a different boss fight depending on which you pick.
I think roller rink. It was a fun one.
Yeah, I really like both of those scenarios.
I will say that for me, I think the most fun to do the actual like art and stuff for is probably the zoo one. I actually love the idea of the arcade one is fun because I love little side quests in video games where you like enter another video game and like the characters are in something else. But the zoo one is fun because there's they go to like the different exhibits with the different animals, and then they go to the cafeteria and they have really fun dialogue. But there's a really
visual
funny
gag.
Yeah, there's a really funny visual gag that I like. At first it was going to be a small thing, but we're like, you know what, let's push it, let's make it really like, let's really sell this gag. So I'm not going to spoil what it is, but if you pick the zoo, I think you're going to get a kick out of it.
Yeah, and all of these scenes are, well, they're literal scenes. Like each one of these scenes opens with a curtain opening and then closing again.
Yeah, that was obviously inspired by the fact that this is a Shakespearean based RPG, and like the characters are all part of the drama club, and everything is focused on, you know, doing plays and the theater group and Shakespeare's plays and monsters attacking. And when it came time to do actually along the same time that we were coming up with this concept, we wanted to do a battle presentation that was totally different from our other ones. And Robert and I have always been, you know, really fascinated by the Shining Force style of battle presentation, where it's kind of at an angle, the camera is sort of down low rather than above or first person, and you get this sort of face-off view between the opponent and the main characters. And one of the first things we mocked up was that battle presentation, which I think is really cool, and it worked out better than I expected. I wasn't sure how it would work out until I saw it in motion. But once we had that kind of mocked up and working, I guess we both realized how well it would work to just keep that sort of looking into the world presentation for cutscenes, because it also kind of feels like you're looking onto a stage. And it fits so well with the theme that once I'd made the cutscenes, I realized if we give the screen transitions like a curtain effect, that it kind of helps sell it and tie it together.
I also like it because it kind of makes it so that the alternate dimensions feel more real than the real world does.
Yes, you're getting pulled into these worlds. Out of curiosity, like aside from Romeo and Juliet, as the first one of these worlds, you tend to lean on the comedies quite a bit. What each world, I guess we'll just call them missions for this case, where the girls go on these missions in to eliminate the nightmares in each one of these plays. Was there what thought went into choosing these specific plays for each one of these worlds? Was it you were looking for certain narrative themes or settings?
I know settings was part of it. We needed like cool settings for dungeons and battles, obviously.
Whether that be like a boat or a forest.
Yeah, like the second dungeon is the Winter's Tale, and I know the Winter's Tale doesn't all take place at winter, but, you know, we wanted to make it a nice, homey, snowy, you know, kind of Christmassy feel to that world.
You can't totally shake the Christmas winter setting following from the last game, can you?
Right.
And frankly, what would an RPG be without a winter setting?
There's got to be an ice level or a cave level, and possibly an ice cave level, and you had to check off a box with the Winter's Tale setting.
Definitely.
I had fun making the ship dungeon, like from based on 12th Night or whatever, which in the play I think I could be wrong. Maybe you can.
I think
correct me, but I think
was it based on the Tempest or 12th Night?
No, it's a little funny. The characters in the game do a play based on the Tempest.
Right. Okay, that's what I was confusing. You're right,
there's
sorry.
actual cutscene, and then
With some
the dungeon.
pyrotechnics.
Yeah, and then the actual dungeon's based on 12th Night, which is where you meet the Shakespearean alternate dimension Viola.
That's right. Yeah. in the Tempest, there's a shipwreck. So
it's a shipwreck.
I was confused. Yeah, sorry.
Right, there's like a shipwreck.
Lots of shipwrecks.
Yeah, Shakespeare
know,
likes sinking
right?
ships. He just had a real thing about
Yeah.
sailors.
Yeah, maybe Shakespeare would have appreciated the Sailor Scouts in his day, or maybe he would have been a fan of East. Well, yeah, and impossible to say.
What's cool about the dungeons in this game is that since they were these like alternate dimensions based on these plays, just conceptually, the concept for each one is a little bit abstract, and so it was kind of cool because the actual dungeons, like designing the look and the layout, we came up with this idea of like making them all themselves a bit abstract. So they all have like kind of an abstract parallax background, and they feel like you're in this other weird twisted dimension rather than being in a real world place. And so it was fun to take a play like 12th Night, like a shipwreck, and make it into this floating, like twisted ship that's sort of like falling apart, that's like floating in this abstract this abstract dimension. And so building the dungeons and making them weird and making them more abstract kind of makes the other worlds and dimensions more distinct from the real world that the other half of the game takes place in.
Now, I'm definitely unaware of the nuances of the development of each of your games, but I mean, the environments and assets here do look at least stylistically similar to what's in Cosmic Star Heroine and Cthulhu Saves Christmas. Like, were you able to have any asset reuse from those, or was building the art assets for This Way Madness Lies easier because of those other games?
You know, each time we do a game and I'm building like the dungeons, for example, or the enemy sprites, it feels like, we've done X many number of games before. We've done 4 games already, or 5 or 6. Like, I have all these previous games to like grab stuff from to make it quicker, but in reality, are easier. But in reality, once you actually start making it, maybe it's just, maybe part of it is me. I have to try and make these dungeons feel distinct and more true to their like the design for a given game, rather than just copying stuff over. So yeah, there's stuff that's reused, but it tends to be something like a dirt texture that's under some grass, like really basic stuff, right, where I start the layout using stuff from before, but then as I flesh out the details, I'm like, this would look so much better if I had like a mushroom for this fairy forest that looks this specific way, and I'll just draw and make a new one because I want it to look and feel more distinct for the specific theme that we're going for. But I don't try to like make it harder for myself or for Robert than we have to. If I can reuse something and kind of tweak it and save some time and trouble, I'll do that. But I often find myself where it's like the game would just benefit a whole lot more if I made this part of that part totally new so that it fits, rather than trying to shoehorn something from a previous game into it.
What I appreciated about these settings is how you would start merging Shakespearean tropes together with the settings. For example, there's the As You Like It mission, but then all of a sudden fairies start showing up, and then Titania's there, and it's very, very clever how you've been subverting these well-known Shakespearean tropes and merging them, and it's smart. It's a smart game, and I mean, you do not need to know Shakespeare to enjoy it at all. But if you do have quite a bit of familiarity with Shakespeare and Shakespearean plays, you're going to get an extra little, that's clever. Quite a few it's clever moments in there. I guess one very important thing that comes with Shakespearean plays on stage is the music. Shakespeare was a big fan of music, and there is a lot of music, lyrics in his plays. The music of this game is, as ever for your games, fantastic. In fact, there are several vocal like songs in this game where people are actually singing it. Who's responsible for the music in the game, and why did you decide to add the vocals into it?
Okay, Joshua Queen did the music for the game. He also did the music for Cthulhu Saves Christmas, so our last game. And yeah, I mean, we liked working with him on Cthulhu Saves Christmas. He liked working with us, so we invited him for this game. And since it was a magical girl game, we're like, it'd be neat if we could get some vocals in here. And he has a band with him and his wife, and he's like, I have an in with a very talented singer. I bet I could get her to agree.
Her name is Sarah Ann Queen, and yeah, I just wanted to say that because she's perfect for this. Like I mean, I don't even specifically remember saying, "Oh yeah, we definitely need vocals in this." I almost feel like it was almost offhand on our part, and then Josh really wanted to kind of go for it, and Sarah was like perfect. Like when they gave us the first track, I was like, "Holy crap, this works really really well," and I think it adds a lot. It's not like every track in the game is not fully a vocal track, but rather it's more vocals will come in and out in certain tracks and not in others. And I think it works really well because it sort of adds an element of polish and it fits the theme. I feel like it fits the theme with the whole magical girl thing really well without being like too overly, in your face, like lyrics kind of stuff.
And also a really fun thing is when the game was almost done, we were working on the sound effects, and he just offhandedly say, "Hey, it would be kind of cool if we had some battle cries in here. Let me see what I could do." And so he got his wife and his daughter to do battle cries for the 7 different characters, and I thought it turned out really well.
Yeah, and they're not just like battle cries. It's like the characters will actually, I mean, it's like there's saying specific things for certain abilities, and yeah, like and I was really impressed too. And we've taken some feedback from play testers and some beta testers and some other developers, and they're all very like they'll tell us that they're pleasantly surprised by how much it adds to the character of the game when the characters in battle actually vocalize certain times.
And that wasn't something we were planning at all. That was just an offhanded idea he had a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and yeah, I know it was so surprising because it was like his idea, Josh's idea, and when they did it, I always thought you needed, like, if you're going to do voice acting, right, in a game, you had to go like all or nothing almost. You had to like have all this voice acting for everything, or don't have it at all, because if you only have parts of it, people playing it be like, oh, well, this is, I don't understand, like, why am I reading dialogue, on mute now, but then they talk at these other times. But this works because it's in battle, and there's a lot more going on in battle. There's, the animation and the enemies, the player is closely engaged with what's happening, and having just voiceovers for battle abilities like adds a whole nother layer and works really well without actually requiring the whole rest of the game having voice acting. So I was honestly surprised by how well it worked, and it worked super well. And I'm glad that Josh and Sarah and their daughter could pull it together like that. So cool.
It adds a lot of flavor to the combat, and I guess sticking to the combat a little bit, I really like the sort of the sort of back profile views that each character has during combat. That's a level of character animation in combat that exceeds all of your previous games. People are probably comparing it to Phantasy Star, I'm guessing. But the game has combat similar to a few of your previous games, where you like design character loadouts from multiple skills, and they're used in combat with no MP systems. But you can guard to restore a skill once it's been used already. And there are sort of dual techs called, using Chrono Trigger parlance, called unites, that have been in previous games as well. This feels like a culmination of a lot of your previous battle system ideas, but just presented in a really, really fresh way. First, this question is for all three of you, including John. Like, did you have a favorite character to either design or see how their machinations worked out in battle? Because I have an answer, but I'd like to hear from all you first.
You start, Robert.
Oh, I should go last. I'm the one who designed their combat.
That's why I said you should go first.
Okay, first. Yeah.
So all of us can go, yeah, that's my favorite too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're a genius.
I think I over-designed her, but I liked how Miranda, has that whole dual ability system, where she has offensive abilities normally, and then it goes to a support or a healing ability on hyper. I get the feeling she's probably the least useful character for your party, but I had a lot of fun designing her setup.
I was sometimes confused or stressed out when it was Miranda's turn. Like I just wasn't sure exactly what to do. So she wasn't my favorite.
But like, excluding her, I'm always a fan of doing the hero character, where I try to have a balance between really strong abilities by themselves and also abilities that support the whole party to show their leadership role.
Yeah, my favorite is probably well, I don't know. I really like having Rosalind on my team because she has so she's got those, abilities that attack the front row or back row. And then she also can be loaded out with different elements. So she's kind of versatile, but then when she's in hyper mode, her abilities are, I think they're more powerful, but then they're focused on one enemy at a time. So I don't know. I feel like she's really versatile, and so it's useful to have her, on the party. But as far as like designing them, I don't know. I think designing like Miranda was probably one of my favorites because like she's like when I'm reading her character, just when we were designing the character personalities and stuff, she's kind of quirky and poppy and stuff, and so she's like the short, and she's got blue hair, and she's almost like the Baba Yaga of this game. To reference Cthulhu Saves Christmas, the like short and quirky and poppy, and she has this like this like silly attitude, and I don't know, coming up with her design was a lot of fun.
One last thing, I guess this ties to the audio and the character individuality. In the Henshin sequence where they all transform, which happens at the beginning of most every dungeon, there's a similar audio theme that plays, but there's a different instrumentation for each girl, and I just absolutely love that. It was I hope I can remember them correctly. It was electric piano for Imogen, it was violin for Paulina, it was chip tunes for Miranda, electric guitars for Beatrice. I think it was piano and harpsichord for Rosalind.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so like they do the Prokofiev Peter and the Wolf thing with giving a different instrumental voice to every character, and I absolutely loved that. But my favorite character in battle was from the get-go Beatrice, because like just really strong poison and status with some dark elemental magic, and the poison bane attack, like you dealing extra damage to enemies that have status effects, but then you remove those status effects. It was a kind of setup and payoff style character that I really, really liked using.
Yeah, putting a nice foundation of poison over top of your enemies at the beginning of a battle is always a good way to start.
Yep.
I would just add that this game has a lot of battles where status effects can make a big difference. So just for anybody that plans to play it, like that's a useful thing.
Well, in the last episode that we did with you guys, I commented that your battle systems, while they resemble the turn-based mechanics of SNES and Genesis games that inspired them, they have much more of a puzzle element to it. You can't just hit fight every time and expect to win, because you can only use each ability once before you need to recharge them, and status effects are necessary or you're just going to get slaughtered. Also, your foes grow in strength the longer a battle goes on, so you need to figure out the quickest, most efficient way to defeat them, or you're going to get slaughtered by the end of the fight. And because of that, it layered on a level of challenge that you don't often find in a lot of turn-based RPGs, where you can just kind of go on autopilot. You can't really go on autopilot in this game.
Unless you want to, and then you just pick easy mode, and then you're good to go.
Yes, that's actually part of the beauty. Another really nice thing about this game is that you put difficulty settings into it. So if people just want to absorb the story, they can go to easy mode, or they can moderate levels of challenge, or they can torture themselves and go to like the super hard level of challenge. I did half of the game in the regular difficulty, and then I realized that because of time differences and stuff, I wasn't going to finish it in time, so I switched to easy so I could get the entire game. I could beat the game. It's a really well balanced system, and it's a system that you guys have been refining over the last 3 games. You guys started with a lot of the ideas of it, the way that you get like at first it's every couple of turns your characters can get stronger, and then you try to use your best abilities at that time. It's been getting refined, and I think that you guys really hit a nice a nice balance with this game.
Yeah, I mean, with Cosmic Star Heroine, we had the basic system set up, but it was still a little messy in some aspects, I thought. And then with Cthulhu Saves Christmas, we tried to uh, change up a few things. So, like the hyper mode, no longer just gave a flat, bonus to damage or effect. It could transform the ability and make it, increase the area of effect or give it additional bonuses. And then I feel like here we further refined it. I really like the Unite system, how you have these one-time use abilities for each battle, and the longer you wait before you use them, the more powerful they become. So you have that tension of whether you want to use it really early to try to make things easier for you or finish the battle quickly, or if it's better to save it up and do a huge bombastic attack later.
For random battles, because there's no MP system. Everything is fully restored after battle, including health. But for random battles, what I would do is I would use everyone's regular skills to soften the enemies up. But then when I was on turn, I don't know, somewhere between turn 3 and 5, I'd be like, all right, I'm just going to spam Unites to finish them off. And it was usually pretty satisfying. Like I felt like I was solving a minor puzzle every time I was, figuring out new enemies in a new setting. And there's no armor or equipment or weapon or equipment customization here, but there are you do customize your loadouts of skills for every character, but also equip traits, which I guess replaces armor, but like as the girls level up, they get more traits, and you can only equip a certain number at a time. And the traits have everything from simple stat upgrades to completely change to bonuses to certain types of moves, or completely changing the nature of moves. There's a lot of customization in the system that it just gets more and more complicated as you get into higher levels. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I thought it would be kind of weird in a Magical Girls series for them to be constantly, upgrading their weapon, or their armor. They usually have an outfit the whole time. So I thought traits would be a interesting way to do it. And since they're based on your level, you can't miss anything. So it gives you that ability to customize how you play the game without locking you into choice paralysis that you're going to get things wrong, since you can always just go back and try something else.
With the variety of different traits and abilities in this game for each one of the girls, was it difficult to try to find the right difficulty balance for all of them? So like I said before, there is a certain like puzzle solving aspect to all these. So trying to figure out the balance so you don't end up with parties that are too powerful or tremendously under. They don't have enough abilities to do it. Was it tricky to find that balance?
It wasn't too hard there. Honestly, the hardest part of the trait system was coming up with enough names for the different traits, because they had to be traits, and they had to sound interesting, and the traits had to at least sort of fit the character who got them.
Mm-hmm. And each girl has at least 15 to 20 of them, right? It's a large grid for each of them.
Yeah, it's something like that. So yeah, that was probably the trickiest part. And also, the trait name has to kind of go along with whatever, special effect it gives. So that took a lot of, revision, and, I got my whole family in on that. It's like, oh, what should I call this one? And as far as balance goes, a big part of our gameplay systems is that we want to keep the player on their toes. We don't want them to fall into a rut of using the same strategy every time. So for maybe 2/3 of the game, the parties are kind of set on which characters you have to use, which I feel like that helps avoid that whole is the player going to be too powerful or too weak? It helps them try different things. Like in the first dungeon, you have a lot of access to powerful area of attack abilities that can hit the whole party. But like in the second dungeon, you lose that because you have a different party composition. But now you have a bunch of really powerful ailment abilities like poison and abilities that disable the enemy. So you really have to change your strategy around there. And then I figured, towards the end, just let the player, have fun and, pick your favorite characters, pick, that overpowered strategy you've been wanting to try this whole game and see how it goes for you.
I don't think I've met the 7th character yet where I am in the game, so I still have a ways to
The
go
secret
before
character?
before I have before I'm certain with how the final party design is going to go, but it's definitely going to have Beatrice and Rosalind in it.
She's very fun. I really like her. She ended up in my final party, actually.
Cool.
It's definitely, that's not a spoiler. It's not like you.
I am not shocked that a game about transforming maidens or ingenues, the last character is also a maiden or an ingenue.
It's not like you're just gonna. It's not like one of the last secret characters is just going to be like, I don't know, the tuxedo Mercutio shows up and doesn't do anything.
I was low key hoping
get killed.
I was low key hoping that I could use the dire wolf that Imogen adopts at one point in battle, but alas, that is not the case.
You mentioned family in that last answer. I'm curious. We were talking a little bit earlier before we started the episode about family connections working on this game. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. My wife always helps with all of our games. I do a lot of brainstorming with her for ideas, and she goes over the script and tries to fix any horrible mistakes. So she helped there, but also one of my daughters helped a lot with the writing on this game, because I am not a teenage girl. And so
I know it's hard to believe listening to this podcast.
It's hard to believe I am not a teenage girl. But I wanted each character to sound distinct. I wanted them to sound, natural. So she did a lot of editing with the writing to make sure, everybody had a distinct voice and everyone sounded appropriate and not like a 40-year-old man. But like beyond that, she also, some of the jokes, that made it to the final game were her suggestion or another one of my kids' suggestions. One of the biggest jokes in the game resulted from a typo that I had written in the script at one point, and everyone thought it was hysterical. So we just turned it into part of the game.
Was it substitute?
It was not substitute.
Oh, okay.
That was.
I thought that was pretty good.
No, it's involving the zoo scenario. So if you did the zoo scenario, you'll know exactly what it is. And yeah, it was just ridiculous. And they're like, you have to keep that in the actual game. And I talked to Bill, and Bill's like, yeah, that's pretty funny. Let's do it.
See, this is what I get for going roller skating.
But the roller skating's really funny. I mean, we stuck in a lot of great references. Yep. At the last minute, I put a everything everywhere all at once joke in there.
Yes, the pizza.
Which, that was like a month ago or so that popped in. And there was actually a joke or two there was a joke that I put in just like a week ago. I just saw some of the writing and thought, oh, this would be funnier if I changed it to this. So we've been updating it as we go. But yeah, so she helped a ton with the writing. She did a lot of the intermission segments where you can chat with your party members. And then another daughter of mine really likes to make AMVs. So we were like, hey, you want to make a trailer for the game? And I think she did an amazing job of that. So yeah, it was very much a family effort on my end making this game.
That's really nice. It sounds like you guys, like, you had remarkable collaboration with family, with people who you've worked with in the past, but who really, came out with some really great ideas that you guys didn't think of before. And also, yeah, the game is loaded with references to your past games, both in terms of the dialogue, some of the enemies. There are certainly some Lovecraftian references in the enemies, which made me smile. I love that. I mean, I think that's always a great way to reward fans of your previous games. And they're never like necessary. It's not like you need to have played the other games to appreciate them. But if you had, you go, oh yeah, that's funny. I remember that character.
Yeah, and there's a cameo boss, as is our want.
I fully expect Cthulhu or Dem or someone to show up as a boss later on.
Yeah, it's not one of them.
It's a pretty good setup to
all right,
as well.
Right. Okay.
You'll get there. I understand that talking about, the future when your current game hasn't even come out yet, it's going to come out in 2 days, might be a little presumptuous. But I remember a few years ago when we were interviewing you, you were talking a bit about how you always had an interest, a curiosity about maybe putting a dating sim or a visual novel component into some of your past games. For the future, I don't know what you're doing next. Have you ever thought about expanding beyond RPGs, or is this like you guys love RPGs? This is where you guys really, really, I mean, it's where you've been living for years, but this is really where you want to keep developing your talents. Or have you thought about maybe doing something like a visual novel?
We've thought about doing different things. Everything tends to be RPG adjacent. Like visual novels have a lot of similarities with RPGs, and you have games like Persona, which is basically just an RPG crossed with a visual novel.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love turn-based JRPGs. So, I mean, that's always been where I've been focusing. But yeah, I'd love to, I'm not sure I'd love to do a visual novel because that just means more writing. And, writing is hard.
Yeah.
Like when people ask us questions about making these games, a lot of the times they come at it from, they'll ask Robert, you've probably noticed this, Robert, but they'll say like, oh, did you get into this because you love writing the stories so much? Like people, I don't know if it's because so many RPGs, like a lot of people get into them for the stories and the characters and these epic fantasies that last, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 hours. And I can understand why that for them, the core, like this big part of it is the story, and it should be. But, it's always been funny to me working with Robert where it's like, story's important, but for us, really, we're trying to make like a fun turn-based RPG mechanically first. That's like our primary like starting point, and we want to make a story that's good and fun and interesting, and leaves an impression on people. But we always get to a point where Robert's like, the writing is like it's such a hard part of it. Like I don't want to do anymore, But I mean, I think it definitely our games have a definite sort of feel and like tone and quality to them that's fairly consistent. And I think I've always been happy with how the writing and the stories and stuff have turned out. I mean, they're not going to be like competing with the latest 90-hour epic, but they're not supposed to either.
I think that you guys have found the perfect solution, which is, you both just tell Robert's daughter, hey, we need the scene by tomorrow, get on it.
No, I was very impressed with, how well she did with this game. And, I've been, as good reviews come in, I call her over and say, hey, look, this person loved thought the game was hysterical. How's that feel to have, random people online praising you? But, I think for me, the writing can be really difficult just because the first draft is always terrible and you just have to get it done so that you can make it better. So I'm glad that, it turns out to be a funny game in the end, but, I spend most of the time going, okay, this could be funny, but it's not now. So what do I need to change to make it funny?
I mean, the RPG scene especially the indie RPG scene, has developed considerably. And I would argue that you two and your studio you guys are responsible for that. Because
that's not true.
No. It's not. You were forerunners in the indie scene, especially with indie RPGs, with the release of Breath of Death VII for Xbox Live indie games, and then of course things really took off there was a brilliant 2-pack of Breath of Death and the first Cthulhu game on Steam.
Sure, but I mean, there had been RPG Maker games for years before we did anything. And I really feel like the whole indie RPG scene got a huge boost from Recettear, which came out on Steam before we did. And I feel like that really paved the way for, Steam accepting indie RPGs and, the, surge of great games that we're seeing these days.
Well, speaking of the surge, I mean, when you guys got started with the indie scene, I remember I was listening again to the podcast we did a few years ago, and like finding Breath of Death VII on Xbox Live indie games, it was pretty buried like under a bunch of menus. But nowadays, the indie scene is absolutely massive. In fact, tomorrow there's going to be a new Nintendo Indie Direct. And I mean, that's, the indie scene is mainstream now in terms of the excitement that it builds. Since you guys have been there since the beginning, what developments on the indie scene really have you excited nowadays? Like, how has it changed since you first got started?
Well, I just want to add before we go into that too much, that a lot of our, like, where we are and how we got here, I mean, there wasn't a big element of luck too. Like, we got in on Xbox Live Indie Games making RPGs when there were not really any of those kinds of RPGs on the service, and that helped us stand out. And we got lucky with a lot of dashboard coverage. And I mean, getting in on Steam when Steam was kind of closed off and only just starting to release or allow, third-party publishers and indie developers to release on there. Like, we got in kind of early, and a lot of it's good, fortunate timing, right place, right time kind of thing. So, I mean, I will forever be grateful, but and that's something I always try to keep in mind, is that, like, we could have repeated everything we did exactly, but if we had done it at a different time, we might not be here, like in this situation. So
timing is everything.
Yeah, just timing and being in the right place at the right time is a big part of it. And I always try to keep that in mind so that I'm always, just appreciate like the chances and the opportunities we got, and a lot of the people that we got to know and kind of helped us get there as well.
I highly appreciate both of you giving credit to other people where credit is due, but yeah, timing is everything, but you need to have the right product. You need to have the right mixture of creativity and polish and gameplay. And you guys didn't just get lucky. If you had released something terrible, given all of the same circumstances, it wouldn't have worked. But you released a number of games that really captured people's imaginations and reminded them of the RPGs of their youth on the NES, but modernized in terms of its systems. And that took, yes, it absolutely 100% agree, that took a lot of luck, but it also took a lot of talent to get there.
Yeah, I insist that you give yourself a little bit more credit, Bill, because
okay.
These games are consistently fun, and you've forged your own style that is mining a specific part of the nostalgia brain a little bit, but like they're popular and fun. And an individual person might have a specific favorite from anywhere in your catalog, but I think that each of the games that you make at least looks better than the previous one and is doing some creative wrinkle to make it stand out among your catalog. Because I'm really enjoying This Way Madness Lies, but I don't think it's my favorite game that you've made, because I mean, looking at my Steam library, I have, I guess 7 games that you've made, and I think all of them are absolutely worth it. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Cthulhu Saves the World a Kickstarter success before Double Fine Adventure happened?
Yes, it was.
So yeah,
Yes.
you've
not the game itself, just the enhanced version that we were trying to port to the PC.
That's what it was. Okay,
the PC port with the Cthulhu's. Did we add the Cthulhu's Angels mode from the Kickstarter? Was that one of the things that we added? I can't remember offhand.
It was added with the PC versions.
Yeah,
I don't remember
right.
if we specifically mentioned it in the Kickstarter or not,
right.
But it was part of the updated version.
Yeah, Cthulhu's Angels mode, where it stars October, and Umi is a possessed version of herself with wielding Sharp the sword. I've played Cthulhu's Angels. Don't worry about that. But I think that you've created an identity and a reputation that's very fun and positive, and absolutely fits with what RPG Fan and Random and Retro Encounter do. So it's been a pleasure and a privilege playing your games and talking to you over these past couple of years.
But to answer your earlier question, back in the Xbox Live Arcade days, you'd have a few indie games coming out like maybe once a week or so, and they'd make a big deal out of the big ones, and it'd be a big event. But now there are so many indie games coming out that you can just go online one day and suddenly find your favorite game ever, just came out, and you didn't even know it existed before today, but somebody made a game just for you. So I love that about indie games. I love that I have this whole list of indie RPGs I'm looking forward to playing when, our release dies down a little. I mean, there was one of our friends made a game called For a Vast Future that just came out a few days ago on Steam. It's all Game Boy style sci-fi. I'm really looking forward to trying that out. And, I just love that, it's become so easy to make and release indie games now that anybody who has an idea and is willing to put in the effort can do it.
I've seen some of the stuff from For a Vast Future, and also that's something I very much appreciate about both of you, is that you do utilize your platform, and arguably, you know what, I don't know how much more praise either one of you could take, because I just noticed Robert like quickly pivoting and changing the subject, but you do use the platform that you have to promote other interesting games and other indie developers and things like that using your Twitter account. And I've always appreciated that, because it's not only a good thing to do, but it also exposes people to other really worthwhile projects.
Yeah, I mean, the indie development scene and the little indie JRPG development scene, it's like if we all like not necessarily work together, but if we're all like promoting and helping each other, it like expands the pie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's no real downside, but to highlighting projects like the one Robert just mentioned, and I feel like that kind of thing, it kind of what goes around comes around, I guess. It's always been good, and it's positive, and we want to see, like, if we can expand the popularity and the market mind share of RPGs like this, it's good for all of us. It's good for little RPG studios like ours as well. So I mean, there's really no negatives in my opinion.
Yeah, like the idiom, a rising tide lifts all boats. If Undertale's successful, so now people go look for more RPGs, and
yeah, exactly.
It just helps everybody.
Yeah, but the thing is, everyone says that, but not a lot of people practice it, and you guys do, and that's something I very much appreciate about you and your studio. Well, we're going to wrap this up, but I wanted to ask you both a question, a very, very important question, that has absolutely nothing to do with video games or your studio or anything. You are releasing a game in 2 days, and I imagine that even after that, you're still going to be pretty busy with promotion. But now that you've finished development on your latest title, what are you going to do with yourselves for the next couple of weeks?
Well, I'm looking forward to playing video games again.
Yeah, I missed that.
Games that I did not have any involvement whatsoever in making.
Maybe even stuff that's not RPGs at all. Just flat out like polar opposite of an RPG, whatever that may be.
I want to play the VR version of Thumper.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm very much looking forward to playing the new Plague Tale.
Oh, I got to start that. It's pretty awesome so far. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Well, let me tell both of you. I just started last week. I found it's a little known game called Hades, and I've missed it for years. And it came out a few years ago. No one's been talking about it since then. I just played it. I think this thing is going to explode any day now.
Yeah,
Jono, we recorded 2 Hades episodes last year, or about around 2 years ago.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Sollosi. None at all.
Thanks for listening, buddy.
Diablo in 30 minutes.
Well, I think that both you both deserve a rest. You both deserve some solid video game time on the couch.
Yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be good, and just we'll keep up with obviously trying to talk about the game more, and obviously we'll be doing whatever bug fixes or quirks that need to be patched that weren't found up to this point. And It's not like, oh, the game is released, we're just flat out done, like turn off the computer and don't come back. It's like, we have to stay on top of it, so we'll be doing that. But at least it won't be like a mad rush at that point. It shouldn't be. The game seems like it's in a good shape for the launch, and we'll continue to like put things in that are nice to haves rather than like absolutely necessary, get it in for launch kind of stuff. So it'll it should be a good launch, and so I'm actually pretty excited about it, and not a ball of stress about it. Like it's I'm sure that always changes, like the day of, like when you're like, oh my god, what's going to go right, what's going to go wrong. But at the moment, I feel pretty confident. So I'm looking forward to it, and looking forward to doing stuff after maybe a few days after, where I can just play a video game or just draw stuff that's not related to this game or whatever.
Absolutely. Before we wrap this up, is there anything, Sollosi, that you'd like to ask, or is there anything that Bill or Robert, you guys would like to say?
I guess I have one question. You do not have to answer in specifics, but I know that at least with some developers, when they're finishing their current game, sometimes all they can think about is the next game. Now, without saying anything about what it is, like, are there ideas percolating in there for the next Zeboyd game?
There's always ideas.
I always have ideas.
Always ideas.
My wife was joking that if I ever get stumped on what game I want to make, just make another game, and then I will come up with all the ideas of the game I'd rather be making. So,
all right, that's consistent with other things I've heard. Sure.
You know how you write something? You just start writing.
We should. At some point, I think we've talked a lot about doing more of a strategy style game, and Robert wants to do an apocalypse related game with strategy elements. That would be fun. I think we would both be into doing something like an Etrian Odyssey style game, not necessarily first person, but that series involves a lot more in the dungeons than just the battle systems, and I think it would be cool to tackle something like that. So I don't know, maybe we'll do something like that, but we kind of end up deciding, we'll go through 50 ideas before we land on something. So we'll see.
And also, you don't have to necessarily abandon the idea of transforming superheroes. Just saying, you can still do that.
Yeah.
Hey, I gotta say, as a Canadian maritimer, your post-credit scene in this game just hit me right there. Loved it. That was a moment I was like, yes.
Yeah,
Nice.
I feel like a lot of games have a problem where the ending, you already feel like you already know what's going to happen before you get there. So I wanted to throw something that was a surprise at the very end. And the concept in the ending is something that I've discussed making at some point. I don't know if that will ever happen. And if it did, it wouldn't be a sequel to this. It would be its own thing. But I thought it was a fun little thing, and I'm glad somebody appreciated it.
Yeah, I wonder how many people pick up on what that is. I only know about it because Robert's talked about it. I mean, so, but I still think it's funny nonetheless. So we'll see.
Well, I would like to thank both of you for spending a good chunk of time with us, considering that I imagine that you have quite a to-do list. You just did an AMA on Reddit, I believe. We'll include a link to that in the show notes so people can read about that. And just, again, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. And thank you for making this game.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. And I also wanted to reiterate that, this was a really fun, team group project. Like Robert mentioned, how his daughter helped and stuff. But I also wanted to mention how much enthusiasm and work that Josh Queen did and Sarah Ann Queen did, and how much of their direct influence on the polish of this game kind of shines through with the audio. So big time, credit should go to them as well.
Definitely.
Okay, well, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping here before we wrap up for the day. So, this has been a really, really great time. You guys have a game on sale in a few days. We have stuff on sale too. Haha, feel that transition. We opened a store for RPG fans, so you can find it at www.rpgfan.com/shop. It's a fantastic way to support the site and get some stuff on there. You're looking for some Christmas presents? We have some Christmas presents for you. So check that out. I also highly suggest that you check out some past episodes of Random Encounter. Last week, we did 2 episodes in a row. Last week, we did an episode on asexual representation in RPGs. Caitlin was on. I had a really, really great time talking to Caitlin on that one. This is not the only podcast we have here at RPG Fan. We also have Retro Encounter. And Retro Encounter, it's Mass Effect month. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Sollosi?
Right. I am the showrunner for Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly podcast. We just hit episode 350 last week, but the other three episodes coming in November to celebrate N7 are going to be about Mass Effects 1, 2, and 3. Jono, you, I, and one other guest had a lot of fun talking about the three Mass Effect games and how each of them improves and iterates on the last, and how the characters and narratives evolve and sort of come to a sort of like come to a head in Mass Effect 3. It was hugely entertaining for me to revisit that trilogy in 2022, and we can experience it all together on Retro Encounter. And in December, we're still planning out the rest of the month, but we're going to do 2 episodes on Xenosaga Episode 1, German subtitled Phrase from Nietzsche.
Cool. We also have Rhythm Encounter, which is RPG Fans Music Podcast. Just a reminder, because we had 2 episodes of Random Encounter in a row, you are going to be getting 2 episodes of Rhythm Encounter in a row. So for the next 2 weeks, Mondays, it'll be Rhythm. Next week is going to be an episode on Pokemon, and then the week following that is going to be the best RPG music for your morning commute. So if you are looking for some new music to drive to work, that's going to be your source. If you'd like to get in contact with me here at Random Encounter, you can fire me off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future episodes or discussion questions, please share them. Fire me off a message. You can also send me an email at jlogan@rpgfan.com, or you can find me on Twitter at the moment at Jono_Logan. Now, I'm not the only person with an online presence on this podcast. Sollosi, where can we find you online?
That's right. As long as Twitter is still above water, you can find me on Twitter at The Real Monsoon most of the time, and at Evoker for Dogs at other times. On the RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike.
Cool. And to our guests, Bill and Robert, where can we find you online?
You can find our Zeboyd Twitter at Zeboyd Games on Twitter, like you said, as long as Twitter exists. And then I'm at Bill_@_Zeboyd.
And I'm at Where's Zompire on Twitter.
And where can we find This Way Madness Lies online to buy it?
This Way Madness Lies is on Steam, and it's coming out November 10th. The official price is $9.99 USD.
That's $9.99.
Yeah, 1 penny short of $10, and it has whatever recommended currency exchange prices Valve gave us at the time.
Cool. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. You can help us get the word out there. You can rate us on iTunes, your other podcast players of choice. Again, both of you, thank you so much for joining us today. You guys have been so busy, and the fact that you spent a good hour with us is just, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us, and it was fun to talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. And Sollosi, thank you for coming on and co-hosting with me.
It took very, very little persuasion on your part. It was a pleasure talking to you and all three of you about this game and the Zeboyd catalog in general. Cthulhu Saves Christmas is still on Steam, and December is soon. Just saying.
It is like I said before, it is a kick stocking stuffer. And everyone out there listening to this podcast, fair thought and happy hours attend on you.